thank you so much for coming to Proud to Practice. We're here to talk to you today more about what it's like to be LGBTQ plus in the legal profession, and we have a wonderful panel here with us. First, though, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mari Nemick. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I serve as advocacy counsel at the National LGBTQ plus Bar. The National LGBTQ plus Bar is a nationwide network of legal professionals and affiliated organizations dedicated to promoting justice and equity for the diverse LGBTQ plus community through advocacy, education, and collaboration within the legal profession. We have a number of fantastic resources for law students. We have a whole law student website called Backpack to Briefcase that's full of great resources for you, as well as a law student group affiliate program. Members of that affiliate program get 50% off student membership with us. So if you aren't sure if your law student group on campus is an affiliate, reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat in a minute. We also have a number of awards and scholarships that we offer, and we just began a mentorship program this spring for law students. So I highly encourage you to check that out. And finally, we also host the annual Lavender Law Conference and Career Fair. This year, that will be July 13th through 15th in Chicago, Illinois. We have a very robust career fair there, as well as numerous opportunities for law students to network and lots of panels and programs to help you prepare to practice. Additionally, every law student member of the National LGBTQ plus Bar is also a member of our Law Student Congress, which is the student wing of our organization. The Law Student Congress is led by an executive board, which our moderator, Kaylee, is a member of. And we also have the chair of our board here, Elliot, and I'll pass it over to Elliot now to briefly talk a little bit about the Law Student Congress, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mari, and thank you everyone for being here. So as the chair of the Law Student Congress, our goal is to connect our students and their affiliate groups around the country, connect with them to provide resources, gain insight into what's happening on all different campuses in all different areas of the country, and help our students build their future careers by making connections with LGBT professionals like our wonderful speakers that are here with us today. And ultimately, our goal is to uplift our future LGBT lawyers by providing resources to help them have a successful and affirming law school experience.
Right.
To you, Kayla.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Kaylee Shaner. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a 2L at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and a member of the Law Student Congress. I'm super excited to be moderating this panel. These speakers are really just amazing and represent a whole kind of width and breadth of different legal practices. And I think it's going to be really great to hear from them. So I'm going to start and go kind of presenter to presenter to if you can tell us who you are, what you do, and just kind of briefly how you got to where you are. And I'm going to start with Nesta, who's on the far left of my screen.
Okay. Hello, folks. I am Nesta Johnson-Rose. I'm located in Northeast PA, where I have a solo consulting firm, and I do a whole kitchen sink of stuff. I teach remotely for PSU Law. I work of counsel behind the scenes with a queer family law firm. I do trainings on a contract basis with the lovely LGBTQ plus Bar and the ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence. I consult on responsible AI development. I mean, I really do a whole bunch of stuff. In previous roles, I represented kids in the family policing system for 5 years in Brooklyn. I did appeals, also representing children, and then I moved to a national queer org where I worked on queer family policy nationwide. And I identify as tri-bi, racial, sexual, and polar. And I like to say that I exist at so many intersections, they might as well put in a roundabout. And I try to bring that lens to my work.
I love that. An intersection of multiple identities doing multiple different types of work. So we are very, very lucky to have you. Fitz, you're next on my screen, if you could.
Hey everyone, I'm Fitz, she, her pronouns from New York. I live out here in Berkeley, California. I'll try to give my background briefly, but I have a lot of jobs. So I spent the bulk of my career in the federal government, prosecuting insider trading and Ponzi schemes and the like. Worked in all levels of the government, decided to go on the private side I was Deputy General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at an activist hedge fund. We were trying to win board seats in public companies to get them to be more environmentally friendly. We had a lot of success there, winning board seats on GM, Coca-Cola, and some other companies. Left that, and now I co-founded a company, a startup. I'm the general counsel and chief compliance officer. It's a hedge fund and a media company called Hunterbrook, and we've been growing fairly quickly. I got my JD from Washington University in St. Louis and MBA from Wharton. When I went to Wharton, I met former athletes, and in addition to my day job, I've bought and sold sports teams. So a group of my fellow Wharton alumni, we got together, started a sports investment fund, which I do on the side, and I've invested, bought and sold a few teams, invested in a lot of women's sports teams. Currently working on bringing a women's professional soccer team to the city of Philadelphia. So that's a little bit of my background.
All right. As a Philly girl, I'm very excited to see the PSU rep, the Wharton rep, and I'm absolutely dying for women's soccer in Philadelphia. I've had the union for a while now. We absolutely need it. My little gay heart cannot stand that. AJ, you're next on my screen.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kaylee, and thanks to the bar for hosting this great program. I hope lots of people view it today, but also in the future. AJ Wipfler, he, him pronouns. I'm an openly trans man and living now in Sacramento, California, so down the way from Fitz. Somewhat differently from the two previous panelists, I have done a lot of the same type of work for a very long time, but that work has been working as a law clerk or research attorney for now 6 courts around the country. I am currently at the California 3rd District Court of Appeal, which hears all manner of civil and criminal appeals from the trial courts throughout California's Central Valley, and that basically entails a lot of legal research and a lot of legal writing, helping to draft memos, and also the drafting and helping to draft the opinions that the court will ultimately hand down in each case that comes to my judge's chambers. I've done similar work at the Federal Circuit and the Ninth Circuit as more of a traditional chambers law clerk position, and happy to speak to anyone who has questions about the sort of clerkship conveyor belt or difficulties in finding clerkships. It can take a lot of creativity and patience, I've found, but happy to speak to that. My first job out of law school was at the Eighth Circuit Staff Attorney's Office based in St. Louis, although I went to law school in New York City at CUNY, City University of New York. And I've been privileged to be able to be out in all of my applications to these various courts around the country. Partly by virtue of having done a lot of LGBT rights work with various organizations before law school, so including that in my resume, and then also sort of highlighting it in a lot of my materials just to share all of myself in places where I felt comfortable doing that, and also to help stand out in a competitive market. So I'm happy to say, as far as I know, that has always been to my benefit, and I'm really happy to share that experience and also hear, that's not always the case. So really happy to be part of this. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you, AJ. I'm hearing another bi we can add into the mix, bi-coastal for sure. Lots of California, New York, Philly. I love it. Last but certainly not least at all, Lydia, if you could share with us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks for joining, everyone. Really honored to be here. It's my first time serving as a panelist. So, but yeah, my name is Lydia. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm located down south in Texas. So I think we got the whole country covered at this point, coast to coast and in the middle. I graduated law school in 2020 from Georgetown and then moved back here to Austin, Texas. And if you know anything about Austin, Texas, our former governor called it the blueberry and the tomato soup. It's definitely, if you're going to live in Texas, I think Austin is the place to be. I currently work at a product liability defense firm. So we do a lot of, we defend a lot of auto manufacturers, consumer products, pharmaceuticals, medical device, basically any kind of product that you can think of, we, defend. So my path to this job, my career path has kind of been interesting to say the least. I never would have really found myself in this position. So I went to law school wanting to do civil rights law. So I started off at a plaintiff side employment discrimination firm. And due to various circumstances, I found myself at the AG's office doing tax litigation, but mostly doing unemployment benefits. And then I transitioned into private practice doing, workplace injury, billing, working in the private sector. In private practice doing a workplace injury. And that's when I started billing and then found myself here at my current firm, Bowman and Brooke, doing product liability defense. So I can talk a little bit about, transitioning from maybe, doing public sector work to going into private practice and billing and what it's like being a queer attorney in the South and how that's kind of, affected my career and just answer any questions about that.
Thank you all so much for being here. The way we are probably going to do this is I'm just going to kind of throw out a question. So any one of our panelists can feel free to jump in. But I want to start with, Lydia, you mentioned being a queer attorney in a variety of different environments, and kind of the environment of Texas obviously is very different than the environment of California, which is different than New York and elsewhere in the country. So I'm kind of curious for each of you, and AJ, you spoke to this as well. What are the ways in which LGBTQ identity and belonging or acceptance has either been an asset or was something that you felt you had to keep to yourself? How has that interacted with your journey through the legal profession?
Yeah, so I can touch on that a little bit. So I'm, in my opinion, very visibly out and queer. So it's not necessarily something that I can hide as I'm navigating just my daily life and in the workplace. I think the most important thing is before you interview at a place, look up the partners that you're going to be working with or your managers that you're going to be working with, look into their background. And, a lot of firms, after the Trump administration rolled back on their DEI policies or slowly removed them, look on their websites to see if they still have those policies in place and check out their DEI committee and see if there's, a diverse group of people in terms of, racial composition, if there's any out LGBT attorneys. I think that's very important because even though I'm in Texas, I am in Austin. I have found myself to be kind of very good at getting a vibe check of what, if everyone is going to be cool with me being out. So I think definitely doing your due diligence and doing research that way is very helpful. And I will also say that, I worked at the Texas AG's office, not in one of the political divisions, but my division chiefs were, super liberal and they always made sure I was comfortable. If there was someone from the exec coming down, they always were, telling me, Lydia, you don't have to talk to them. Like you can keep your door closed. Like we'll make sure that everything is good. We want you to be comfortable. So I think even, depending on the environment, it's really important to have people who are supportive. And conversely, kind of getting into why I left my first job is because even though it was an employment firm, there was a lot of kind of microaggressions, homophobia, believe it or not, racism, even though they did employment discrimination. And that's one of the big reasons why I left. So I think it really depends. Like, you can work at an employment discrimination firm, but a lot of the attorneys there might not be, they might not be as supportive, or just find it to be a way to make money. So I think that's definitely very important. And the biggest thing that I've learned in transitioning workplaces is it's really about, the people that you work with in the office. And even though they might have like a policy on their website, that you still need to kind of be careful and do your due diligence on those people.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Before I became a law student, I did a decade of work in DE&I, and I've worked at organizations where, there is a kind of self-proclaimed commitment to DEI, but there's not a lot of follow through kind of on a cultural level within the organization, and things can be really challenging that way. So when looking for an employer, I think it's a tricky balance to strike. AJ, you said this has been nothing but an asset to you. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that a bit more. And again, I only know what I know, so I can't speak to why the hundreds of judges that did not pick up my application or pick up the phone in my various rounds of applying for clerkships didn't take that step. I prefer to think that it's maybe that I went to a not top ranked law school, as opposed to being out in my cover letters and materials. But I can certainly say that the judges who have hired me, I know have been wanting to diversify their chambers, wanting to diversify their court, wanting to uplift, historically underrepresented applicants for these sorts of clerkships that often, lead to bigger and better things and look like a lot of one type of person at the moment. And so yeah, I can definitely say I have had a positive experience and did not feel, tokenized or anything negative once I got into those workplaces. So, for me, it was important to be out because that really was a huge part of my pre-law school work, was LGBT rights work. And, even though I do actually have a choice of whether to be out as trans or not, that I'm proud of my whole lifetime of identity, and wanted to be able to know that I would be working in a place where I was bringing my whole self to, what is often a 4 to 6 person chambers if you're in a judicial chambers environment. And I will also echo the recommendation to, yes, do your research about where you're applying, but also don't necessarily limit yourself out the starting gate. So when I was applying for getting that first job, is going to be the hardest job after law school for a lot of people. That 1 to 2 years experience box is so elusive. And I was open enough and wanting to do judicial work strongly enough that I went outside of the traditional chambers path to the 8th Circuit Staff Attorney's Office, which I mentioned. And it's sort of like a pool of research attorneys who help the court with certain types of appeals. In that circuit, it's all the self-represented litigants who appeal their cases get directed first to the staff attorney's office, and they do a nice job of sort of bringing new attorneys into a mix of career attorneys. But it's still the 8th Circuit, and this was back in 2016, so not our current environment exactly, but still not really the court I pictured myself working for. But once I got an interview and got a better feel for who I would actually be working with. Being able to confirm sort of the levels of gender affirming healthcare insurance coverage, and just having conversations with some of the managing attorneys in the office. And that really gave me the confidence to move from New York to St. Louis and have a good experience professionally that really set me up for further work in different courts after that. And so I just say, don't be afraid to put yourself out there if the type of experience you're looking for, and ask those further questions to make sure you're going to have a safe environment, of course, and also a supportive environment once you're a little bit further into the application stream, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah. Next step I think we need is a openly trans judge on the federal bench would be nice. Nesta, you have some thoughts on this?
Yes, I think for me, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. I think that my identities have absolutely brought me certain opportunities, especially considering the roundabout factor. I check a whole lot of boxes at once. So for things like wanting, diversity on panels and so forth, I am really a one-stop shop. I think as a brown person, a brown bi plus person in a straight passing relationship, my race has factored more into my negative experiences more so than my orientation. But I did find that when I was working at the National Org, which was originally more focused towards lesbian advocacy, now sort of general LGBTQ plus rights, but a lot of the constituency continues to be sort of old school folks. And I think that it may not come as a surprise that although bi plus people are by far the widest stripe in the rainbow, we don't always feel welcome in queer spaces. I remember one experience where someone was very interested in my coming to participate in and speak during a cruise for lesbians that happens annually. And I, felt the need to say up front, hey, I am bisexual. I don't identify as a lesbian. And that conversation ended there. Crickets after that. And, that is fine because that was a lesbian space and I am not a lesbian. And that space was not for me. But, I have found and also helped to create spaces that were for me. And I think as far as looking for jobs, talk to people who used to work there because they'll be a lot more honest. They will be a lot more real with you about what it's like. And I would say take a look at the employee handbook and, maybe ask explicitly, how would they handle if a client said, I don't want to work with this person, because I'm sure it's come up and that'll tell you a lot.
Yeah, I 100% like by erasure is definitely a whole thing we could have a separate panel about, I'm sure. Yeah, I want to kind of stick with the professionalism aspect of it, because when we talk about professionalism, right, there's so much baggage that comes with that term. And I'm curious about two particular facets of it. One is like the standards of professionalism, so like dress codes and presentation. And the other is, what it means to you individually, like how it manifests. Like what are some of the behaviors and actions that suggest professionalism to you? So anybody can take this. I'm curious to hear each of your answers.
I can jump in. AJ and I have lots of crossover in addition to living in the West Coast. We also have a crossover of having lived in St. Louis, Missouri. I went to WashU probably about 14 years ago at this point. And at the time, they had a class. So I don't know if they still do this, but they had a class for 1Ls where they kind of walk you through what you have to do in order to like be in the profession. And some of it was like dress code type thing. And was like very much women wear this and do this and men do this, right? It was very much women supposed to wear heels and skirts, and men in a suit and tie, and this is how I have to present. And the layer on top of that on race was the message a lot of the my fellow Black law students got too, was we had to change our hair. There were many people in my class who, I have locks. I'm Jamaican. Locks are very cultural to me. There were a lot of Black folks in my class who also started 1L year with locks, and by the end of 1L or even 2L year, many of them have cut their hair. Many of the folks that I went to law school straightened their hair, did other things because you were being told you had to present in a certain way. Um, and I went through that whole class and thinking this is totally not for me. Like I don't fit into any of this, and I'm not cutting my hair. So like I don't know what I'm going to do in terms of this profession, but I guess I'll figure it out. And I kind of did. I think that I sought out spaces and places and people in particular that didn't require me to compromise any part of who I was just to practice law. It was hard and different. I didn't go to a law firm, mainly because of this reason. I could do a whole like hour about the experience I had interviewing at law firms and some of the things that were said to me even in the interview process, and some of the most offensive things were said in interviewing with employment law firms, which were very interesting. I made a decision that law firms were not for me, big or small. It's just not a space that I wanted to be in. And I ended up clerking for judges, and I ended up working in-house almost immediately out of law school. So I carved my own path, but you do go through this phase where it's like, you're being told this is the mold you have to fit in and what you have to do in order to get a law firm job, in order to be successful and all these things. And all I can say is from my experience, like I've been in some respects proof that there are ways to do it and be successful in this profession without having to compromise the entirety of who you are. You don't have to change your whole identity, personal, anything in order to be a great lawyer. And I've been able to kind of navigate that in my own way. It's not easy. And part of it is finding allies and people who will support you and make spaces for you. And you're kind of going down your own path and maybe sometimes alone, but on the other side of that, you can find really, really great success.
Love that. I'm hearing a common theme through all of your answers, is that finding your people in any situation is really important. Not to mention, perseverance and pushing through those feelings of like, I don't belong because I'm X, Y, or Z. It certainly kept me out of law school until I hit my 30s. So that's why I'm here now. But yeah, I so appreciate that answer, Fitz. So standards of professionalism, what do the rest of you think?
I think, what Fitz said really, really resonates with me about trying to navigate the legal profession when you don't look like the other people around you, especially when there's still courts and their local rules that say, women should wear this length of skirts, like this is how you should dress. And even, even at some law firms, they have some, dress code that's very, gendered and outdated. I want to echo what Fitz said about really, just paving your own path, because, it, like currently at least in my office, I don't know of any openly queer attorneys. I know my firm does have a DEI committee, and I do know of some other queer attorneys in other offices. But it really is about, persevering, paving your own path. I used to have like dyed hair. Obviously, I have like a nose piercing. I show up to court nonetheless, just like this, and I haven't had any comments made towards me. And if any comments are made, I'll just brush it off, even though it may make you uncomfortable. But again, it's about not sacrificing your identity and what makes you comfortable. Because, I used to have, longer hair, used to dress very feminine, but I never really felt comfortable with myself until I, started dressing how I felt on the inside. But I do think it's really important to find your people again. And, if people do make comments towards you, find people around you who do support you and validate your experiences. And thankfully, I have found that. And, I've gone to trial like this. I've, done a bunch of hearings in front of judges and haven't had any comments made, thankfully. But I think it really is about, staying true to your path. So I definitely agree with what Fitz said.
Who could have guessed? Professional means staying true to who you are. Love that. I think that's our theme. Both of you mentioned too, and elsewhere in the conversation, we talked about the term microaggressions or like comments and things like that. So in the legal profession, I feel like that takes on a whole different level, especially when you're in front of a judge, perhaps, and you have to be super respectful. And the judge does a microaggression or misgenders you or calls you by the wrong name, or a senior partner does something like that. Like, how do you navigate that in a profession that values professionalism so much and respect and is built on these hierarchies? How do you deal with that?
I can take this one. For me personally, I encountered this a lot in family court with other attorneys who would often see me outside of a courtroom and assume that I was the caseworker and not an attorney, which I mean, I didn't find necessarily inherently offensive because that's, a valid profession, but also, felt some type of way about it because that's a heck of an assumption. But it was really eye-opening to see how people talk to me when they thought I was a caseworker, because not everybody considers that an equally valid profession, I learned. But I think, for me, especially with the judges, sort of, it just was a question of being quiet, but firm and consistent in speaking up when they routinely confused me with other people who happened to be brown and femme. And it sometimes would take a few times in a row of a judge being like, Miss Jones, Attorney Jones, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, Johnson, Your Honor, my client, and they'd be like, well, Attorney Jones, blah, and I'd be like, Johnson, Your Honor, my position is, and it would sometimes take 2 or 3 times in a row for them to realize what I was saying and to correct themselves. But and sometimes it took a few rounds of doing that with the same judge, but often it did ultimately sink in. And if nothing else, I walked out of there feeling happy with how I conducted myself and having stood up for myself in those moments. In balancing visibility and safety, I think, put your safety first. But I think that visibility can have a lot of value because there are a lot of people who aren't going to feel comfortable being themselves or expressing themselves, and seeing you there can create safety for other people and can create a sense of inclusion and belonging for clients and other professionals in a way that can be really valuable.
Yeah, and that's I think one of the wonderful things about this panel is even hearing that somebody can just like, look, I just corrected the judge and moved on. I think hopefully will inspire people to be like, yeah, I can do that. Like, I'm safe to do that. That's professional. Like, that is allowed for me. To really like stake my claim and say, this is who I am, not that other thing you called me. It sounds basic, but I think it's so important. So like there are so many ways that I think we get microaggressions. How else do you deal with it maybe in a different setting?
I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, as a Black queer woman, it can be any one of those factors that I'm getting a microaggression on, or all of them together, I guess. But I will say it was interesting being in the federal government and being in a position of power. I mean, you have an immense amount of authority and power when you're in the government. Even now, to some extent, you really do get to determine the fates of so many people, right? And I was prosecuting white collar crimes. I worked at the SEC and did a lot of trial work and other types of work there. But I'd walk into rooms and people would be looking around for the lawyer, and I'm clearly the one that has been emailing you, and or they, because of my name, they would be looking for a man, and I'm not a man, and so all these things would happen from the defense side of the table, and it got for me it was quite entertaining sometimes because I would let the uncomfortableness sit there until they figured it out. Because, and then when they did and tripped over themselves trying to apologize, all I could think is, if your lawyer didn't have enough forethought to like look up who I am and understand that who's sitting before them, you're in a world of trouble. And so that just a reflection of where this case might be going, or what kind of defense you have. And so I think when you're in those positions of power, it's very interesting. Even now, as the general counsel of a fast-growing company, I sometimes go into spaces. I work in finance, and so I walk into spaces where it's mostly straight white men. And I'll walk in and I'll be the only general counsel, but people don't recognize me as that, right? And they're still like confused as to like why I'm in that space. And so it takes a few times and like, oh, you're the general counsel. Yeah, yeah, I'm the general counsel. And so that happens quite frequently. I think I'm at a space now in my career. I've been practicing law for 10 plus years now, that um I realize not all space, I don't have to be in the space, even if I'm invited. And so sometimes I just leave, right? If I go into a space and it doesn't feel, something makes me uncomfortable about the space, or I don't feel particularly welcomed, I realize that, and it's taken me a long time to get here, I don't need to be here, right? Maybe I can find one ally and meet that person and just leave. Like, I don't need to be here and suffer through this whole thing. And I can go to a space with my friends or the people that I know that feels more welcoming, and that is more, in the end, more productive for me. So I know that's not always going to be the case, but hopefully, folks listening, that you'll get to a place where you know that you don't have to suffer through being in a space that's not for you, and finding those spaces that are, and being comfortable just leaving if it's not, right? Or being comfortable just meeting the one or two people in that space that you find allyship with, and that being enough.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first. Vibe checks, right? It is okay to check the vibes. I love that. That brings me to another question that is like huge when it comes to professionalism, which is networking, right? Like, so there are so many events in a law student's journey that are built around like, oh, this is a great networking opportunity. Go to do this. Hey, lavender law is coming up. That's a whole networking opportunity for folks who are on the LGBTQ bar. So like, my question to all of you is like, how important is that? How do you do it? What are the ways that you encourage law students to do it, even if they are like nervous or apprehensive, when it comes to meeting people? I'm curious about how that all looks for each of you.
Yeah, so I can touch on that. So for me, I'm pretty introverted, so the idea of going to a big event, like a networking event, marketed as a networking event, and then going up to people to talk to them is quite daunting to me. But I also want to add that we tend to think about networking as, I'm going to this event, I'm going to go network, I'm going to, post on LinkedIn, I'm going to add all these people on LinkedIn. But really, networking is your day-to-day job, like the people that you interact with, opposing counsel, co-defendants counsel that you work with. One of the things I've realized is that I've been networking this whole time. I have been building my network just by, doing my job, litigating cases, communicating with a bunch of different people. And, that really builds your network, and the people that, that you work with, supervisors, anyone else, the support staff that you work with, that is all your network. And in a way, you are networking just by working. And that's one thing that I realized. as, you know, because I've had attorneys reach out to me to say, hey, I've got this case, blah, blah, blah. Can you recommend me someone? Or, hey, are you looking for a job? I know a job opening, etc. And I've slowly realized, like, oh my gosh, I've been networking this whole time, even though I haven't been going to events, but that is networking. So I think, building your own reputation, doing great work day to day, being a professional, that also counts as networking. So that's kind of one thing that I learned.
I
I,
love
I would
that.
say networking starts in law school too. You'll be surprised how many you'll graduate and the folks you're graduating with you'll run into in the profession. Like that's just how it works. Like you'll run into people professionally and otherwise. And so you want to have a great reputation even from law school because you may need to call up, one of your law school friends from or someone you went to law school with many years ago because you might be going to their firm and you need a recommendation, or you might be, they might be somebody you need advice from or help later on. And, whether they're going to help you or not really depends on what they remember of you from law school. And so, don't underestimate the fact that you're going to run into the people you go to law school right now. You're going to run into them again, right? So, like, it really even starts in your law school classes.
So don't throw too much shade is what I'm getting. Got it.
Definitely. And I would say, for sure, getting jobs is a lot more about having some connection to someone who knows that job is coming available or who is connected with the person who is hiring and can, help you get just looked at, get your materials looked at. And, you don't know when that moment is coming. And so just being open to those real connections like Lydia and Fitz are mentioning, definitely, I think should be the priority over meeting as many people for a quick chat over a cocktail at whatever mixer you might be at. I think for me, I found I feel like a lot of lawyers identify as introverts, I'm discovering, but I am also a self-identified introvert, but I will say sometimes there's this like anonymity in a large networking event where if you maybe go with a friend or colleague or two and then, set yourself a goal to meet some number of people, you're just going to learn more about what different ways there are to be an attorney or what it's really like to work in a sector you hadn't really considered. And so I considered like those large mixers to be just sort of like horizon expanding learning opportunities more so than I'm going to walk away with a mentor per se. And if I'm looking for a little bit more like real connection with people, for me, I feel like another way to do that, even outside of your colleagues at your office, is, and in law school, a lot of your local bar associations, if you have an LGBT bar association, bingo. If you have another affinity bar association where you can serve as like a law school representative or just attend some of their board meetings and volunteer for some projects, that will, immediately like connecting through some sort of service I've found to be a fulfilling way for me to, I don't know, sort of a little bit two birds, one stone, but more so just that allows me some access to have a real conversation with someone I might not otherwise know what to say, as like a cold email or something. So if you have the time and if there are even any kinds of organizations you can volunteer for during law school and after, then I think that can help expand and naturally turn into some mentorship opportunities.
I want to come back to mentorship in a little bit, but I'm also curious too. Once you've made those connections, how do you all like stay in touch? Again, I think we're all introverts here, maybe. But like it always feels very weird when I met someone to just kind of send that cold email and be like, hey, what's up? So how do you navigate that? What are some ways in which you stay in touch with people that, you've built those connections with?
Oh, I have one for this. So unfortunately, I don't know that this is a thing anymore. But Westlaw used to have these head note of the day emails where they would send just like a really interesting head note, or, you know, a little odd fact pattern or what have you. And so what I would do is, if they sent an interesting one about contract law, I might email my old contracts professor and say, hey, you know, thought you might find this is interesting. I think that sort of making that, I totally agree that networking isn't just about making connections, but also maintaining those connections. And I think that when you do it in a way that makes it about the other person and not just about you, that can feel a lot more authentic and a lot more memorable. Hey, I thought you would find this interesting. Hey, I'm wondering how you are doing, and not just, hey, I wanted to remind you that I exist and give you an update on me. You know, you could fold that in. That's kind of, you know, part of the outreach. But I think that focusing on them can be a really more natural feeling and also more effective way of maintaining those connections.
Yeah,
I
I
love
would
that
say
idea.
I would say LinkedIn is can be your friend. So when somebody has an update, like they've changed a job or something like that, that's a great way to reconnect with them. I usually will send people a message to their emails because not everybody checks their LinkedIn messages, but I would send a message to the emails and say, "Hey, I just saw you got a new job on LinkedIn. Hopefully, it's a it's a great transition. Let's grab coffee sometime." You know, and that's the message, right? Like, and it's just saying congratulations, right? I don't. It's not really asking much of them. But it's a great way to just people like getting messages like that, like, you know, and so especially if it's something so big or a big deal to them, they've authored something, or maybe they've been recognized, won an award for something, a quick message just to know that you're thinking of them is a great way to keep up with people. And then you can graduate over time to something that I used to do was send folks a little bit more information about how you're doing. Like I would say, "Hey, I was just thinking about you. I saw you won this award. Just to give you a quick update. I'm entering my third year of law school and looking at these particular jobs. I'll keep you updated on how things turn out for me." I used to do that quite a bit in law school, and I would say like 9 out of 10 times I would get a response. It would be like, and it would be something quick. It would just be like, "Oh, congratulations," or "Let me know if you need any help from me," or anything like that. And again, it's just a way to just keep people up on kind of what you're doing and letting them know that you're thinking about them. It doesn't necessarily have to be a heavy lift. It doesn't have to be a long email. The email could be one sentence and it's still meaningful. So like, there are ways in doing it that releases the pressure from you. And it is not like you have to do it with everyone you've ever met. Just the people that like maybe vibes, like you have really good vibes with, and you just want to keep in contact with them because, they're in the profession that they're in the type of law, doing the type of law that you're interested in, or maybe they live in the area or recent grad or something like that. Pick the 5 people or the 4 people that are meaningful to you and make it a point to reach out to them every so often. Again, not to make it a heavy lift or anything, but just quick notes and messages to people make a difference.
I love
I
all of these ideas. Keep them coming.
so I just wanted to add one little fun anecdote about networking, about Fitz saying that networking goes back to law school. For me, networking went all the way back to high school because I recently connected with an attorney, and turns out that his wife was my high school English teacher, and she had very positive things to say about me. So we've kept in touch. He works in the building next door. So really, beyond just professionalism in the workplace, it's really about just being a good person in your day-to-day life. But yeah, just a fun little anecdote. Just things kind of just go full circle sometimes.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. I think that brings me to my next point too. So, our audience, of course, is law students who may be at various stages of law school, but eventually they will all be rock star, superstar attorneys, and they'll all be kind of on your side of the fence, talking to people about how they networked and how they did this. So I'm curious, like, as folks who have walked that path, how do you, pay it forward? How do you go from being a mentee to a mentor? What are the strategies that, you use to find those people that are eager to learn from you and what you do, just as much as, you were once looking to learn from others?
I mean, the basics are also meaningful. So, anytime I get any LinkedIn message or email message from someone looking for advice, definitely make sure to respond to that in a timely fashion. And beyond that, I've had, again, the luxury of a little bit of a not too stressful, like long work day work environment. So I do feel like I have a bit of an obligation and opportunity to do more volunteering with our local Sacramento LGBT bar, setting up and maintaining a mentorship program that really focuses on getting like local law school students connected with local practitioners. And then, I mean, there are through the national bar, through the national trans bar, just a lot of opportunities to volunteer to mentor folks, virtually even. So just having conversations and trying to like lower the temperature from what feels like a very high stress environment where you have to be the best and you have to find the perfect job and you have to check all these boxes, and just sort of give an example of like, this is how it worked out for me. And I remember feeling what you're feeling, and deep breaths. And it just does work out if you, do work hard and be a good person also. So those are some of my thoughts.
I try to think of myself as a connector. So when people reach out to me, if they're looking for um, someone in a specific field, or maybe they want to go in-house and trying to figure out how to make that happen for themselves, I can connect you to, 5 people who've done who maybe meet that requirement, right? And try to get you in front of the right people. So I always try to help people out by connecting them to folks. I'm also in a position where I get to hire as we're building this company. So as I bring in other lawyers, I try to hire in the way that I wish all people would hire. I also build a culture that I think that is this incredibly inclusive as we can be. And so I get to build cultures and community and a company in a way that I think that I would think that other companies should strive for. And so I'm in that position now, which is I'm really grateful for, right? And so I can create those spaces and connect people where I can. And so that's kind of how I, keep that door open behind me.
We have 6 minutes left, and we just got a question in our Q&A, which I love. This is a really great question. Said, how do you all recommend balancing professionalism when you connect with other queer professionals on social media as well as LinkedIn? Is it improper to talk to them via Instagram or other avenues versus emails and LinkedIn? So, how do you navigate that? It's like, can I add this person on Instagram and chat with them? Or is this like, I know you professionally and I have to keep that separated?
That's a good question. To me, it depends on how you met the person. Like I've met people in very professional settings. So then to me, I would connect with them on LinkedIn, or, to me, LinkedIn team feels more of a professional setting, or email or something like that. But I've also met very like successful, highly ranked lawyers and judges in non-professional settings at the club. And so in that case, then, sometimes, we connect on Instagram or wherever else. And, that to me feels like that's fine because that's kind of how I met you in a less professional way. But I do try to keep conversations different, meaning if we are planning to go to a party or club together, then maybe that's a different conversation, a different platform than if I'm sending you my resume and we're talking about work or job stuff. I try to keep those two worlds different. So maybe that's more on email, or maybe we're having a phone call or going to coffee versus planning a night out together or something like that. So to me, it just depends on how you met the person and what kind of rapport you have with them. Like, are they, you only met them once? Have you met them repeatedly? In what context? And so to me, it just depends on the context of the situation.
I would agree, and I would say this is another space for the vibe check, right? Like you can sort of feel it out. These kinds of relationships can evolve over time. Relationships that have started out super, super professional have sort of over time shifted to being sort of more personal friendships. The context where you met matters, as we talked about before, in those kind of scenarios where maybe you're not in a room with all of your people, but you found one or two of your people, and y'all were the couple fish out of water who were side-eyeing and side texting through it together, right? Like that's a little bit of a different vibe. That might be a more of an opportunity to get a little bit closer. But also when in doubt, you can always ask. You can say, hey, would you be okay with me adding you on Instagram, or what have you? And if they're like, hey, I prefer to kind of keep that separate, like most people will just say that. So just do the vibe check, and when in doubt, ask.
I love that. So I guess we can just kind of wrap up here in our last couple of minutes. I know y'all have talked a little bit about going to the club, or like the stress. Like, very simply, how do you strike that work-life balance?
Therapy is great. My wife is a social worker and a therapist, and so finding sources like that has really helped me. I try to meditate once a day, even though it's like 10 minutes. Like just carve out 10 minutes just to like sit and breathe a little bit before I jump into my day, because my days can be pretty hectic. Going on walks. I try to go to the gym when I can, just so I'm not sitting all day on my computer screen. It does make a difference to get out and do something, whether it's a walk or run or go into the gym or something like that. I think that really does help balance kind of your mental health a little bit.
I think for me, I know I work at a private firm. There's always some fires I got to put out, or there's some deadline coming up that like everyone missed or whatever. But for me, I have my Outlook and Teams settings to where I don't get email notifications after 7, and I don't get Teams notifications after 7. I turn it off, and I put the apps on my phone on a separate page so that I don't see it, right? Because I'm protecting my peace. I gotta have my peace and my alone time. If there's something truly urgent, then people have my contact information. They can call me. But some attorneys, they work later hours. They work in the night. Maybe they have kids or something, so they log on at 10. Or I'm relaxing. I don't want to see emails spamming me at like 10 p.m. and I'm like stressed all of a sudden. And usually it's something that can wait until the next day. And I know it's really difficult for younger attorneys who are very eager and want to prove themselves to try to be available at all times, but that is a really easy way to burn out. And I know some attorneys might take advantage of that. Will be like, oh well, Lydia's responding to emails at 10 p.m. so like I can just ask her to do stuff at 10 p.m. I think striking those boundaries early, turning off those applications and notifications is something that has really helped me protect my peace and my work-life balance.
Yeah. Well, I know I want to hear everybody's answers, but we are at time. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the panelists. These have been fantastic. It was really, really great getting to talk to you. So I will just finish things off and turn it back over to Mari to wrap us up. But thank you again so much.
Yes, thank you so much to all of our wonderful panelists. I know there was a question about how to give back now that you're successful professionals in the field, and what a great example this panel was of giving back to the next generation of LGBTQ plus attorneys. So thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who joined us today, either live or who is watching this as a recording. Please don't hesitate to reach out and ask any questions. If you have more questions, you can always reach me. My email address is Mari, M-A-R-I, @lgbtqbar.org. I also hope that we see you at Lavender Law this summer. It's a great way to get plugged into the LGBTQ plus legal community and build your support system, as folks talked about in this webinar. And yeah, thanks again. We look forward to supporting you throughout your legal career. Have a great rest of your day.